Thanks for coming back. Here it is, part 2.
And I'm up in Vermont and I'm training with a guy. We're training for a 100-miler and it's probably early 2000s. And he's saying to me, you know what you should start? You should start a race business like in the 1980s they used to have on TV where the athletes would go through an obstacle course, whatever. And I'm saying that's ridiculous. That's not a legitimate sport. That's silliness. Like if we're going to do it, if I'm going to put on races, they're going to be like 500 miles, right? So in 2001, I say I'm putting on a race. I'm going to put on a race down to the British Virgin Islands. It's going to be 350 miles. You're going to be swimming, 40 miles. Just craziness. Well, of course, 100 people sign up. I lose $500,000 because who the hell would do it? I actually lost a guy that was helping us set ropes. The story would go on forever, but he caught himself while he was setting ropes for the course, and he got into a dinghy to go get stitches, and nobody noticed that the dinghy didn't start, and he drifted away. When the race was over 9 days later, I found out that this guy was missing. He was part of our team, and I had to get the Coast Guard involved, and they laid out the maps, and they found him 150 miles away. He had drifted to Little Tobago. So not only did I not make any money, not only did nobody show up, but I was probably the first survivor, right? Like before Survivor.
He was alive?
He was alive. Yeah, he was alive. Coast Guard brought him back.
How many days was he at sea in the dinghy with a cut?
Like eight days he was gone. He drifted over I don't know how many days, and then he was eating crabs and drinking bottled water that had also drifted to Little Tobago from the race. So, or from other, who knows from where, from boats and stuff. So I thought for sure I was going to get sued, and he landed with the Coast Guard, and he said, hey, can we go get dinner? I'm starving. I said, this guy's awesome. So that was my first event I put on. Every subsequent event was very... So
after that, you knew for sure you had a giant new market category opportunity, right?
It was a disaster, but I'm relentless. I won't give up, right? Like,
why did you, what was it that you felt was missing in the race world? Like, what did you see or what did you want as a competitor that you didn't see?
At that moment in time, I don't think I was saying to myself, there's something missing. I thought, you got to understand, let's go back to the pool cleaning business. There were hundreds of companies that were cleaning pools and doing construction work, and they were a lot smarter than me, and they were around 20, 30 years. I was baffled and scratching my head as to why all the customers were leaving and coming to me. And when I finally learned that, oh my God, it's just because I do these little seemingly insignificant things. I clean up the furniture. I straighten up the shed. I don't have my hand out asking for money before I even start. Every customer was leaving 30-year-old businesses and coming over to me. And so I probably thought with that first race, like, yeah, I could just do a few things differently and make it better. But it didn't work. I lost a ton of money. September 11th happened, but I didn't quit because I'm not a quitter. And so I did it again and again and again and again. And I continued to lose money. And by 2009, coming out of the financial crisis, and thankfully I'm making money in finance at this point on Wall Street. So I'm funding these losses.
So the whole time you're on Wall Street up to 2009, you're still playing with this race business.
I'm playing with the race business. I don't want to give up because I feel like I was so early to it before anybody doing this stuff. And I'm so authentic and it's legit. And this guy, this friend of mine that I'm racing with, keeps telling me about this silly idea he has, this stupid obstacle thing from the 1980s. And we've been carrying dumbbells for 5 hours up the mountain in the backyard in Vermont. He's talking about this stupid idea. And I'm sitting at Thanksgiving dinner, 2009, my wife's family's house. I can't help myself because I never just sit around and chit chat, and I start laying out a little business plan. I've already lost, let's call it $1.5 million over the last 9 years at this thing. There's no reason I should be continuing, but I can't help myself. I'm noodling on this idea. All right, maybe I'll do an obstacle course. It'll be military inspired. And my brother-in-law, I say, listen, you're not working right now. Why don't we, because the financial crisis, he got laid off. I said, why don't we tackle this thing together? So he says, okay, at that dinner. So we start to put together a business plan. And over the next 2 weeks, we go back and forth and we start to get excited, as most entrepreneurs do before the real shit hits the fan. It's exciting, right? The idea.
And was there anybody else in the category yet, Joe?
At that time, the only person in the category, real person in the category, was a guy in the UK called Tough Guy. And he had been around since the 80s, but I didn't know him. I'd never heard of it.
So you didn't know he was there?
He was there, but I didn't know he was there.
Okay. So in Joe's world, this is just this crazy idea, and it's just the reference points are essentially in your head and with your friends and your family, and you just bang for 9 years. You bang your head against this wall. You lose $1.5 million. Everybody who knows you thinks you're fucking nuts, and this is where we are.
And this is where we are.
All right, I love it. Excellent. Keep going.
So my brother-in-law, after 2 weeks, after he got me excited because he's confirming my insanity, right? He says, I'm out. He says, I'm going to go start a server farm with EMC, and it sounded a lot more lucrative. So now I'm stuck with this thing. So a guy I know from the neighborhood back in Queens, back from the old construction days, he's looking for something. And so I said, hey, listen, I got this crazy thing. I'm at my wit's end. I can't really put more money in, but I'll invest 50 grand in this thing. Here's the plan. Over the last 2 weeks, I've noodled on it with my brother-in-law. Would you run with this? And so this guy's looking for something. He says, yeah, I got it. I said, I'll tell you what, we'll go 50-50 on this. This is a neighborhood kid. You run it, I'll put up the money. I don't want to deal with it because I'm kind of burnt out after 10 years, but I think there's something here. So he lays out the first 7 races, my buddy Sean, and he pulls it off. And he does a good job. And after the 7th race, he comes to me and he says, listen, he goes, I don't really want to continue. And I said, why? He said, because I know you're a nutcase. You're going to want to go global with this thing. I just want to make some money. We could put on 10 races a year. We could make some money. We don't have to go big, and you're going to want to go and expand. And he was seeing me, and I wasn't even looking in the mirror. I wasn't even seeing that, but he was right. I'm a maniac. So I said, well, why don't you do the food concession and I'll run with it from here. So I bring in some guys I used to race with, and this thing is now Tough Mudder shows up, like a competitor. There's a whole backstory there. And I'm a maniac. I'm competitive. So if I see an advertisement for anything but Spartan, I'm crazy. And so I got to figure out how to do advertising. So if they're going to advertise once every hour, I'm going to advertise 10 times every hour. If they're going to do, I'm going to do 10 times that. And so before you know it, I'm spending $300,000 to $400,000 a month on this thing that was supposed to be a $50,000 investment. And I am,
and you're hugely spending on marketing to beat back Tough Mudder. That's a big part of it.
No, it's that and my stupidity. If you build a brand, you're supposed to start a fire in a location. Let's say you started in Brooklyn, New York. Then you build a ring around it. You work your way out to Long Island. Then you build a bigger ring. You go to Rhode Island, maybe. You build a bigger ring. You go to Boston. I went Vermont, New York, Montreal, Slovakia. You wouldn't do that because you have no advantage.
Nothing multiply. There's no multiplication of the value, right? There's no. So the multiplier effect doesn't work because the people in Slovakia had no idea about the Montreal event.
Exactly. So I completely screwed that up, and every event I announced was going to cost me $500,000 to $600,000, whether there was one person there or 10,000 people there.
Whoa, slow down. So these events back then were $600,000 to put on your cost.
My cost. So
wow, that's no joke.
The ship
is half of it insurance?
No, believe it or not, insurance is not that bad relative. It's if you've ever done a kitchen renovation, imagine doing a kitchen renovation on the side of a mountain while it's raining and stretching it out over 13 miles. I mean, that's what we're doing, right? Yeah. We're doing a construction project on the side of the mountain, and we got 10,000 people that are going to interact with that construction project.
How interesting for you that your first entrepreneurial foray connects to this, right? Your ability as a construction guy and a guy who can manage complex construction projects makes a big difference in this business, right?
Huge difference when we look at where our proficiency lies today, and we have great people. I'm not gonna say it's me, it's my team. The putting on the events is easy for us. Easy. I'll give you a great story. The Pope, we were putting one on in Italy, and the Pope shut us down because he was anointing a saint. It must have been 3 years ago. And normally we have 7 days to set everything up. And because of the Pope and the anointment of the saint, everything was shut down. And we had 14 hours to get the race set up before the event.
So he mandated a country holiday and nobody could work.
Well, in this particular area, it was like cordoned off. We just couldn't get to our area.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we finally get in there with 14 hours to spare, and we pull off an event. It's not perfect, but it just goes to show you we're very proficient at doing that, and really,
you're kind of putting up a mini city in a way, aren't you?
Another mini city in a way. We got 7 days to do it, and we've got 5 tractor trailers that roll in, and it's a serious project. And
of course, it's not just the course; it's the concessions, and it's the Johnny on the spots, and it's the whole thing, right? It's
1,000 volunteers we got to manage. We bring in 1,000 volunteers, which
wow,
they're not really volunteers because they're getting a lot of stuff from us, so they're paid volunteers. But So early days, we're spending $600,000. I'm announcing all these events, and I'm going crazy then to market to make sure those events are attended, because we're going to spend that money whether there's one person or 10,000 people. So my bookkeeper turns to me, and she's managing this stuff up in Vermont. I'm working out of Vermont at this point, even on my finance stuff, and she's like, "What is this Spartan thing? Like, we're going to be out of money in like 5 months. Like, what is this thing?" Because I'm running like $300,000 credit card bill. I mean, it's just insanity. But I'm convinced there is something here, and there's no way I'm going to let anybody beat me. So anyway, I have this finance kid working in the office that's now alleviating some of the pressure from the bookkeeper. She doesn't want anything to do with this because it looks like it's a train crash, right? And the bookkeeper comes over to me one day and says, "Hey, we sold 800 registrations yesterday." And normally we would sell like 50 registrations a day, 60 registrations a day. We sold 800. I said, "Well, you must have a bad formula in your Excel spreadsheet." And I sold 800 tickets. He's like, "No, we sold 800 tickets." And I said, "Holy smokes, this thing is working. Something's happening."
What city was that, Joe?
Just across the board. You'd sell a few tickets at each race coming up.
And then all of a sudden, boom, in each city, 800.
Boom, we sold 800 tickets. And so when I think about what happened.
And how long, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Joe, but how long after you really jammed the gas and when from the 50 grand extra to, oh, fuck, here we go. Maybe that's it. From the 50 grand to 800 an event. How long a time frame was that?
That's a year and a half of at that point I've got probably throwing out crazy, $3.5 million invested and no recovery in sight. And then all of a sudden, boom, we sold 800 tickets that day, right? At $100 a pop, that's only 80 grand. 80 grand is a lot of money, but relative to the investment, it wasn't like all of a sudden we were seeing daylight, right? It was a flashlight we saw in the distance.
Yeah. So for that year and a half, you're, as the kids say today, balls to the wall, and you can't see the category coming to you yet. There's no pull. It's all push.
Oh, it's push.
And you got these competitors, and you're saying, over my dead body, are any of these guys going to? And are they getting any better numbers than you are at that point?
They are, because they did the right approach.
They did the rings.
They did the ring, and they did something else that was really smart. They didn't take a sport approach that we took. I said to myself, if I'm going to do this, if Joe De Sena is going to be involved, it's going to be legitimate. It's going to be in the Olympics someday. It's going to be authentic. We're not going to just electrocute people to do silly things. Like, this is going to be a sport. It's not going to look like a Renaissance fair. By doing that, I limited my audience, right? Because not a lot of people wanted to come out and suffer. They They didn't want to do burpees if they couldn't do an obstacle, but fuck you. You could not skip an obstacle. If you were going to skip an obstacle, you're going to do 30 burpees. I was going to punish you for that because that's the way life is. So that caused the problem. That people would say, well, I don't really want to sign up for that. Sounds like hell, right?
So I'd rather go get electrocuted and not have to do the burpees if I skip one than do 30 burpees when I skip an obstacle I can't get through.
Yeah, because then I get to brag and say, hey, I got electrocuted. We had beers afterward. It was more of a party. It was more fun, right? And so anyway, we were definitely losing the battle. And I remember I was skiing one Saturday with my kids. We're up in Vermont. And I'm on the chairlift, and it really, like a ton of bricks, lands in my lap and says, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you worked your whole life to build a nest egg, and you just wiped out 85% of it in the last 18 months, you idiot.
Because when you originally moved to Vermont, if I remember your story right, did you feel like you were semi-retired or downshifting, or you sure as hell didn't think you were going to put all this money to working on a crazy idea?
No, I was able to cover the growth of a family. I just got married, and I could have not worked forever.
Yeah.
I didn't have, I couldn't buy an island, but I was okay.
But yeah, life was good. There was moose.
Yeah, there were moose. And so I'm on the chairlift, and I say, I got to call my buddies on Wall Street. I got to get money. I got to get money by Monday. So I call up my buddies, and I said, look, you're not going to understand this business. I have no business plan. I don't have a valuation, but I need money, and I need it in 24 hours because if not, I'm fucked. And they sent me a bunch of money, and it's just started to turn.
Would you call this, in retrospect, an angel round? Is that?
Yeah, this was.
You just said, "Hey, I'm calling in favors."
This was more than angels. This was God, right?
Send lawyers, guns, and money. The shit has hit the fan, right?
Yeah, they.
And your buddies sent money.
My buddies sent money, and that bought us about 6 months. And I was embarrassed to go back to them for money. And so I said to myself, you know what I'm going to do? I remember when I was in college, and I'd never done this before. I remember when I was in college, they talked about how companies would float their payables versus their cash so that they would earn interest. So I said, we're just going to put a policy in place where we don't pay bills for 6 months. That's just our policy. So when a vendor bills us, no problem, we're going to pay you, but we pay 6 months out because if I could float, I could survive, right? So,
and because of your Wall Street background, you could do better than a 1.5 points on the spread, so to speak.
Well, I didn't even, it wasn't even for the interest. I needed to do it because I needed to collect revenue today and pay bills 6 months from now.
Okay. So it wasn't so much that you could play with it a little. It was literally you needed that much time in between buying and paying.
Exactly. I needed to collect revenue every day, and then feed out the payables as slow as possible. So thankfully the vendors played along with us. They were great.
So you were upfront with them. You said, look, this is what I got to do, or I'm in deep shit.
Well, you got to be careful, right? Because if you don't have confidence, right, then the whole thing falls apart. So I probably left off the deep shit part.
But still, when you say to somebody, hey, look, I got a new business model here, and this is how it's going to go, they got to know that you're stretching about something, right? People aren't stupid.
It was a stretch, and I think we both probably knew what we were doing, and no one said anything. And so...
And you still had all that confidence in the world that I hear in your voice right now, right?
I'm a confident guy. And so then a credit card processor calls me. I'm still up against the wall. I'm paying bills 6 months out. I burned through the Wall Street money. And a credit card processor calls me and says, listen, we want to be your credit card processing agent. And I said, no, thanks. We don't need to switch agents right now. We're fine. I got bigger problems, right? And they said, no, you don't understand. We'll pay you to switch. And so there was silence on the phone. And I said, you going to pay me? Well, how much business do you do? And I went through my number, and they said, we'll pay you $1 million to switch. And I said, well, when would you send the money? They FedExed me the check. I had it the next day. I didn't even sign a contract yet. They FedExed me $1 million. I had it the next day, and they bought us some more time.
So,
and
and this just literally fell in your lap.
fell in my lap. And then now it's like late 2011, and then a legitimate institutional fund heard about us, loved the name, called us and said, "Hey, we want to invest." Then Reebok came on. Then we got NBC, and one by one the dominoes started to fall. And this year, 35 countries, over 1 million participants, largest endurance company in the world, 200 events, 275 events. I just found out we're doing this year, plus another 200 workouts, mass workouts. So, people look at it and say, "Oh man, this thing just came out of nowhere." Well, it didn't really come out of nowhere. 17 years ago.
Hey, Joe, you're clearly just an overnight success. It must feel great, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Was it Lucille Ball? I think it was her who said, "Yeah, it's easy to be an overnight success. It just takes about 15 years." Yeah.
She was, by the way, as a kid, in addition to delivering newspapers and doing all, I think every kid should watch like 50 episodes of Lucille. She was awesome.
Right?
Yeah, she was awesome.
Like the greatest ever. Yeah. And she used to just be on our TV.
And mine too. And today,
Right?
today kids, you don't see any of that stuff.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
And
So anyway,
so, and now I was watching the documentary. Oh, shit. Don't
my
forget.
buddy's documentary, Rise of the Sufferfest.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
And in there and in other places I've read, the claim is that obstacle course racing is the fastest growing sport in the world.
Fastest growing participatory sport. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
it's slowed down a little bit. And the reason it slowed down, there were about 300 competitors showed up. We didn't talk about, let's say, between 2010 and 2012.
300?
At least 300, just in the United States alone. And 294 of them went out of business.
How did you, now, maybe it's because that Spartan spirit, but how the fuck did you beat back 290 competitors?
Well, they all made a couple of mistakes. One is you needed to be really well funded, right? And so even though it sounded like I wasn't really well funded, I was a lot more well funded than any one of those guys. Number two, you had to really understand this concept that this thing was going to cost you $500 or $600 to put on. And I don't think any of those competitors understood that once they announced they were putting on a race, they had a $600,000 bill coming.
How could they? I mean, that sounds ridiculous that they wouldn't know that.
Well, I don't think, I had a construction background, right? So I kind of knew what it was going to cost to do this thing. And I think you just slap a couple of pieces of wood together, you build an obstacle. That doesn't work that way, right?
And the obstacles have to be bomb-proof, right? I mean, they're going to take a lot of abuse.
Got to be bomb-proof.
They got to be seriously safe, right?
We're spending $100,000 in an event for a medical team to be there, right? Just go down. The numbers are unbelievable. And so if you don't understand that, you get to D-Day, you get to the day, and you're completely upside down. So these guys all went out of business, and we survived. But when there were 300 competitors, the industry was growing more rapidly because they were all marketing to couch potatoes and every mom and pop, everybody to come out. So, but it's still growing. It's still growing. I had 0 races 2 years ago in China. I'll have 8 this year. I'll have 20 next year. China will be my largest market in the world. Japan, I had 0 last year. I'll have 5 next year in Japan. So it's growing like crazy. It's just the United States, I don't have a lot more room to grow.
Yeah, interesting. So does your category exist, Joe? If you sort of think about that axiom, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And when I look at our world, I see a world where we have, for the most part, traded comfort for aliveness. It's almost like we've been sold that happiness equals comfort. And not that I don't like to be comfortable, I do, but you could absolutely kill yourself with being comfortable, right? And and of course, 70% of people in the United States are obese or overweight. And so is this the corollary reaction? It's like, fuck sitting on the couch, fuck Dilbert and being in a cube. I gotta get back to my Neanderthal self, and I gotta go do something like this. Or is there more to it, or what's it about?
More to it. Here's what I think. Hopefully I explain this well. Is, you know, on the farm, I had a bunch of animals, and we had 8 dogs. And so the dogs were my pals. I was with them all day, every day. And I would say to people that ask that question that, you just asked, or what would happen if you came home and your dog was sitting on the couch, smoking a cigarette, and she was watching TV, her hair was in a bun, her nails were done, right? Completely lethargic. You would do a double take. You'd say, this is complete insanity, right? But we are animals, just like the dog. And somehow it's okay for us to sit and type all day and be hunched over and eat garbage food and do exactly what I just described, that visual of the dog. Whereas if you come home and the dog's like running through the puddle and attacks a bird and like lives, like, that's normal, right? Well, that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be breathing heavy. We're supposed to be running. We're supposed to be sweating. We go out in the rain. And somehow we forgot that. And it's easy to see how. It's if we rewind the tape and go back to the mid 1800s, you and I are dying of all kinds of diseases. We got a horse and carriage. We're trying to go across the country and the wheel breaks, right? Grandma dies. Your wife's giving birth. It's like a complete shit show. So,
and that's just how life is, right? It's like, that's not a shit show. It's called, that's just what we do, right?
that was yesterday. And so you could see how we would welcome like a couch and penicillin and a TV and popcorn when it's the 1850s. It's gone so far in the wrong direction that I think this it felt really good to me in the 80s and 90s, let's say. It felt really good to just get outside and feel alive. And so anybody I could get to come do it. I was just at West Point this weekend. We had 10,000 people at West Point. I can't tell you how many people come up and they're like, you changed my life. You changed my life. 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 91-year-old. You changed my life. And it's like, I didn't change it. All I did was just build this. You got
91-year-olds doing Spartan races?
We had a 91, this is crazy. We had a 91-year-old World War II vet come out, and we carried him through the course, protected him, right? 91 years old. I mean, he was still a rugged guy, but it was like, we can't risk. But just awesome.
So he had a lot of support, but you got him through the course.
We got him through. Awesome. So it's very much needed in the first world. I think if you and I were down in a third world country, this is not needed right now, but in the first world, this is needed.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine even a country like Indonesia, which is probably somewhere in between,
We do well in Indonesia, believe it or not.
Really?
We do well in Indonesia.
Well,
yeah.
Fuck, what do I know about anything then? That's fascinating because, I've been there a bunch surfing and, you mentioned Fiji. Are you in Fiji too?
We're not in Fiji.
Not in Fiji. Life in Indonesia is tough.
Depends. I mean, we're in certain pockets, right? We're in the Philippines.
Philippines would make sense to me. Yeah.
We did an all-female race in Saudi Arabia. All-female race in Saudi Arabia.
Wow. What was that like, Joe?
Unbelievable. We did a race in Malaysia.
This is a crazy question, but what do they wear?
They wear the whole thing. I don't know. What do you call it? A hijab?
Yeah, but does Reebok make a Reebok version of that? I mean,
what's funny is our first race where I saw that was in Malaysia, and it had to be 100 degrees. And there had to be, if there were 10,000 people at the race, there had to be 1,000 women dressed in full dress, the headgear and everything. And it's black, and it's 100 degrees out, and they're carrying buckets, and they're not complaining. I called my guys that make our merchandise. I said, you got to make you got to make one of these. We got to make a Spartan. These women are unbelievable.
Right.
And we never did it because we got 500 other things to deal with on a daily basis. And then Nike came out with one. So I'm not crazy. Again, I'm normal. Everybody else.
And how do you think about CrossFit?
I love CrossFit as a consumer base. I mean, they come to our events in big numbers. I'm personally not a giant fan of throwing around heavy weights, but I do like a lot of their methodology. We believe more in body weight exercises.
But I guess, do you have do you happen when you happen without them, or do they help accelerate you, or are you, because I look at the two of you and go, similar ideas in terms of pushing the body in a way that, was not sort of particularly the norm, certainly 20 years ago, right?
I would say I'm making up numbers, but I would say CrossFit is about 15% of our audience.
Okay.
Military is probably 15% of our audience, and then it's just every Tom, Dick, and Harry.
So it really is really widespread.
That comes out and does these things. When we go into a neighborhood, we go into a market, we bump gym memberships massively because people put an event on the calendar and then they're just trying to figure out how to get in shape.
They get to work.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, do you have so you have a very close relationship, and obviously an important one, it seems like, with Reebok, yes? Did I lose you, Joe?
Reebok. Can you hear me or no?
You just timed out for a sec there.
Hello?
I hear you now.
I'm going to go to a different spot. Hold on.
No problem. I got all the time in the world.
Hang on a second. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm just doing a podcast, so I'm not being rude. It's okay. I'm going to go to this bathroom over here.
I probably did the first 12 episodes of Legends and Losers from one of our bathrooms.
Yeah. All right. How's that?
That's great. Excellent.
All right.
So
we got a light. Oh, that's a fan. All right. So where were we? Every Tom, Dick, and Harry.
Every Tom, Dick, and Harry. Yeah.
And
so it's really very broad based now. And you were saying, we were talking about gym memberships and how they increase when you guys announce you're coming to town.
They pop, and then we have certified trainers. A lot of people say, well, I want to get ready for Spartan. I want to learn the Spartan methodology. So we certified 1,000 trainers so far, on its way to 10,000 certified trainers around the globe. And they follow our methodology, our program, our mindset. If it's raining, get out in the rain. You're not going to drown. If it's cold, get out in the cold. Our theory is, if you're not cold, you're wearing too much. If you're not tired, you're sleeping too much. If you're not hungry, you're eating too much. So,
it's so interesting, Joe. We had, do you know who Eric Weinmeier is, the climber and kayaker?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was on Legends and Losers, and he just blew me away. And he said so many amazing things. But one of them was, to this exact point you're on, practice little, he called them little, he said a friend of his gave him this idea, practice little acts of courage every day. Do little things that make you uncomfortable. Inject yourself into situations that maybe you wouldn't. Because if you train yourself to overcome little things, little acts of courage, then when it comes time for big acts, you'll be used to it. I thought it was an interesting idea.
No, I think he's 100%. We call it obstacle immunity, building obstacle immunity. So I'm on the exact same page, and I like the way he said that.
Yeah, very cool. And now also, I got to believe, and I've heard you talk a little bit about this, that the growth in social media makes a difference for the growth in the category and ultimately the Spartan brand as well. Does it not?
Somebody said something really smart to me yesterday that I hadn't considered in the last 7 years, and certainly 17 years, which is most people, because I'm not a social media guy myself. I don't even have an account. I just got a Twitter account that somebody manages for me. But most people, they want to figure out what they're going to do on a weekend so that they could get content to promote themselves through their channels. So we are an important platform for that content, right? So social media is important because we're giving them a platform to brag and showcase how tough they are and how badass they are. I didn't even consider that.
Yeah, I mean, a good friend of mine that I've invested in his business, and I help him with his business. The company's called Snap Sports Media, and he's a photographer by way of background. And essentially, what they figured out how to do, Joe, is take RFID tags and connect them wirelessly to cameras. So their primary customers are zip lines, right? And they
Yeah.
ski resorts and any outdoor kind of experience like this. And people, to your point, they don't want to do an event like this or any. You don't want to go to a zip line unless you got photos to put on fucking Facebook of you on the zip line. God forbid, right?
Isn't that crazy?
And so that's a real driver for this, right? I want to be able to show everybody, hey, neener nonner, I did this and you didn't, right? There's some bragging rights that go with this, right?
It's crazy. I didn't even consider that's the driver. It's actually backwards. You and I would be doing it because I want to go sweat and breathe heavy, and it has nothing to do with the picture.
I mean, I grew up my
Hey,
whole life skiing and my dad taking me camping and all that stuff. And I mean, I never
yeah,
even took a picture of it for myself so I could go back and look at the beautiful mountain or whatever the fuck later. I don't know. I was just skiing.
I'm with you. I agree.
I mean, maybe I should have, and I think documenting some of it's fun. And, don't get me wrong. I think GoPros can be really fun and all that stuff. But, like, fuck. Do you really
Same.
have to tell me
No,
what you're having for dinner? And please don't take a picture of your poop and all that. It's the Kardashianization of the world, right?
yeah. I'm 100% aligned. And the good news though is if it's getting people off the couch, then I guess
Yeah,
it's good.
exactly. Now, do you foresee a day, Joe, where a Spartan race is an Olympic sport?
100%. This is going to be an Olympic sport. The only thing holding it up right now is there's a couple of folks within the Olympic. Basically, the process of becoming an Olympic sport is the only holdup. You got to go through the difficult process. So it might take another 4 or 8 years, but me and my kids will be at an Olympic obstacle race.
Wow. And I really believe, frankly, the Olympics needs you more than you need them. And I'm sure being in the Olympics would be incredible and a huge achievement. But the reason I say that is, if you look at the X Games by way of example and the equivalent things that have happened, even, smaller things, the Mountain Dew ski tours and all these sorts of things, right? These more extreme activities, they're way more fun as a spectator sport, right? And so I just got to believe they look at that and say, if we want to attract a younger audience, if we want to attract a more engaged audience, something like having a Spartan races in the Olympics, I mean, that's going to be fun to watch.
No doubt about it. They would do really well with us because we've got such a giant audience. If you look at some of the sports that are Olympic sports, they're so small from a user and viewer standpoint. So we add some serious punch to the Olympics, which is why I know. First of all, it's a legitimate sport. I mean, humans should run, crawl, climb, jump, swim. You look at our starting line of men and women, you're like, where did they come from? Are they from ancient Sparta? These are the most beautiful people I've ever seen. They look like chiseled stone.
Yeah.
And it's not because they're juicing or anything. It's because when you look at most athletes, they're so focused on one discipline, just running or just biking or just swimming. Whereas our athletes they're like MMA fighters. They're amazing.
Well, and the incredible thing, and I think you guys deserve a lot of credit for this, Joe, and I'm by no means an expert in what's going on in the fitness world at all, but, I have friends in that business and friends in the martial arts business. And so I have a little toe in the water and I hear things. Anyway, it seems like over the last, you tell me, maybe decade or so, there's been a huge increase on quote unquote functional movement. We now hear these, people are movement coaches. And to your point, it's not about looking good, or it's not about being purpose built for one sport, right? It's can you have a purpose built body that allows you to move and lift things and do, like, and many of us want to do different things, right? I mean, I love skiing and I love surfing and I love martial arts and I love mountain biking, and and I don't have a perfectly tuned body for any of those things, but I can find my place in all of them. So I guess what I'm trying to say to you is, I think you guys have had a lot to do with this notion that an athlete is a complete athlete and has a range of function capability that is wide, as opposed to, what we've seen in the past.
1,000%. I mean, that's our whole methodology and philosophy. So I'm excited. I was on the phone with Meb, the marathon winner, the last few Boston marathons. Awesome guy, and he grew up a Spartan. They had to escape where they were living and run through the jungle and stuff. And I said to him, when you retire, which will be after this year's New York Marathon, you're going to come over to the dark side. You're going to do you're going to be hooked, because it's no longer just running. I mean, running 26.2 miles is fucking boring. But you come
I know
out,
I did it once and I didn't do it again. My IT bands are fucked up, and
yeah, it's boring.
Yeah.
So you're gonna just have a blast with us. But I hate to do this. I gotta jump. So how do you I could stay on for a few more minutes so we could do a proper ending, but
we could just end. I did really want to talk to you. The last big thing I had was to talk to you about how amazing it's been that you've been a pioneer in turning the company into a media company, because It'd be very easy for you to have a headset that says we're a race company, but you've written a huge book, you have a huge podcast, a TV show, incredible on social media, and probably other things I'm less aware about. But so I wanted to understand, like, did you make a frontal lobe decision that we're a media company?
I wish there's a common theme you're seeing here, but I wish I could say that it was well thought out and I was pretty smart, but that's not the case. What happened was I thought we needed TV, because if we had TV, I could lessen the marketing expense and stop using my credit cards to pay all the freaking marketing bills. So I went crazy, and I like a pit bull, and I just hung on until we got NBC and we got television. And then I wrote a book because, again, no rhyme or reason here other than for the last 30 years, I wanted to write a book.
It's a great book, Joe. And your story is so awesome. It's great.
Well, I had this thing in my head. I want to write this book. And I'm down in Austin, Texas at the South by Southwest thing. And some guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, I want to be your book agent." I don't even know what a book agent is. And he says, he sits me down. We have breakfast and tells me he's going to get me a book deal, and he'll find me somebody to turn the way I write into English so people could actually read it. And he guided me, and I wrote this book. So now I wrote this book, and it's going to come out. And this guy, Zach Evanash, who runs underground strength training gym, I think it's called. Anyway, he reaches out to me and says, "Hey, I heard you have a book coming out. Could I put you on the podcast?" I said, "What's a podcast?" Anyway, he tells me about this podcast thing, and he comes up to the farm, and we do a podcast. And I said, "Man, I got to do a podcast. This is pretty cool." So I asked this woman that lives in town by the farm, who knows how to use a camera. I said, "Hey, could we do a podcast like this? Could you, we'll hold the camera and I'll get some people." And so I wish there was a plan. There wasn't really a plan.
Well, in retrospect, it looks like pure genius. And I also saw you got a quote from Commander Divine for your book.
Yeah. Yeah. Mark, I know well, very well.
You
Mark's a
do.
great guy. Yeah.
I've just gotten to know him a little bit recently, and I was just down in San Diego to do a speech, and he'd been on Legends and Losers, and so we thought it'd be fun to do a follow-up episode. So I went down and we spent some time with him training myself and a couple guys how to kill people Navy SEAL style, and
Love it.
we did a follow-up episode. What a gentleman! Wow.
Good man. Good man. Good looking guy. Great guy. I had him down to the farm. He came to the farm one day, and then he hijacked me when I was in San Diego, threw me in an ice bucket, and made me do a lot of burpees and push-ups, and it felt really good.
I love it. All right. Well, listen, I'm going to let you go, Joe. I know you got your family there. I can't thank you enough. You've been incredibly generous. You're a hero of mine for a bunch of reasons. You're a natural born category designer. I think you've done a great thing for our world and our country, and you're an incredible inspiration. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. And listen, to any one of your listeners, Iceland, December 15th, I believe. So this December 15th in Iceland, if you know the Shackleton advertisement where he asked a bunch of people to come on his ship, right? He said, it'll be pure darkness. Return will be unlikely. There'll be low rations. And 5,000 people signed up. Well, that's what's going on in Iceland, December 15th. If anybody in your audience wants to come, it's a $750 ticket, no charge. I'd love to have you out there, and it'll be like Game of Thrones meets Survivor. It's going to be fucking awesome. So, yeah, no charge.
I love it, Joe. I love it. Thank you, brother.
All right. I'll see you.
Bye. Well, as I think it was Borat who said "wowie wee wow" or "wowie wee wow" or something like that. Holy shit, Joe. Thank you so much. Is there somebody in your life who would love this episode as much as clearly I did? If so, why not share it with them right now? And we'd also appreciate it if you took 2 seconds and gave us a review on iTunes or on whatever podcasting platform or YouTube or however you experience Legends and Losers. Your reviews drive our success, and we've had awesome success, and I can't thank you enough if you've already done it. And if you haven't, would you get on it? Now, a couple of shout outs. My dear buddy Les Schmidt, who I've known for years, great executive, great CEO, sent me an email saying, quote, "Biggest problem with your show is that I don't have time to listen to all the other podcasts I used to subscribe to." And, we don't want to take you away from other legendary podcasts, but thank you so much for the sentiment, Les. Greg Canty for sharing Legends and Losers on Twitter. Thank you so much, Greg. Joe De Sena of the Practice podcast. I was on his show. It's a great show. He's a great guy. He has a huge commitment to people who are in the business of having small healthcare practices or any kind of business, therapy, anything along those lines. A wonderful guy, and thank you for having me on your show. And most importantly, thank you for sharing Judge Filer with the world, episode 62 of Legends and Losers. If you're a regular listener, you know that we have this crazy BHAG of sharing Judge Filer with the world at least 1 million times. And so we're trying to get to 1 million downloads of that episode because we think the world needs Judge Filer right now. And thank you, Joe, for helping us do that. Also, thank you to Nuha Masri, a wonderful gal. I met her at the Wildcat Ventures event that I was lucky enough to speak at with my friend Bruce Cleveland up in San Francisco a little while ago. And she's been kind enough to get into Legends and Losers and also help us with the goal of getting Judge Filer to 1 million people. And so she's been sharing Judge Filer on social media. Also want to shout out to Bob O'Brien. Hey, Bob, you're awesome. Bob has been with us pretty much since the beginning. And on International Podcast Day, September 30th, which, as you know, we tried to have some fun with, he wrote an amazing post on LinkedIn titled 3 Podcasts You Should Listen to. And Legends and Losers was one of them. So, Bob, from the bottom of my heart, I'm so glad you're with us. And thank you. To the folks at Throughput for your awesome tweets. Appreciate it very much. And our buddy, Scott Athan, always playing, always having fun with us. He took a picture of himself wearing a Legends and Losers t-shirt in front of the Dress Barn. And if you're a regular listener, you know we love businesses with the word barn in them.
We would like to thank HarperCollins, Instant Classic Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. Equity Directory, connecting startups to the talent and resources they need to build a legendary business. Our good friends at NetSuite, #1 in cloud ERP. For your invitation, send email to blackhole@legendsandlosers.com. Love to see you on November 9th in Miami. Verve Coffee, the official coffee of Legends and Losers in Santa Cruz, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Tokyo, and always at vervecoffee.com. Pursuingresults.com, producers of legendary podcasts, and this one too. Interview Valet podcast, interview marketing. One day I'm going to learn how to talk. If you're a thought leader, get your leading thoughts on leading podcasts and be represented by Interview Valet. Check them out. Spartan Up, the legendary must-subscribe podcast from our friend Joe De Sena. Bell Destination Events. If you're getting married in Hawaii, get married with Bell Destination Events. They're going to make your dreams come true. Running Through Walls, the great podcast from our friends at Venrock Capital. Check it out and subscribe. Running Through Walls. The Front Row Factor, the incredible new book from our friend and guest on episode 61, John Vroman. And Fathom Marketing, legendary marketing outcomes at fathomdelivers.com. And our dear friends at Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders. You make a donation and we make a difference in the worst parts of the world. Now, we must remind you that this oddcast is a sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and we would love it if you shared the shit out of it. Today's information is provided to you solely for cross-functional purposes. In the event of boring business conversations, take 2 Legends and Losers and email us in the morning. We must warn you this oddcast is clearly produced in a studio that does contain nuts, and it is never tested on GMOs. Always shower with a friend. Don't forget the left lane is the passing lane. Listen to Tom Petty. Man, we're going to miss you, Tom. Only fart in an elevator of 3 people or more. Thank you, Candy Dandy. We love you. And hey, Colin, this oddcast really ties the room together, doesn't it? Today, our deepest apologies must go out to Marissa Mayer, former Chief Executive Officer of Yahoo. Sorry, Marissa. We just ran out of time for you. That's it, my friends. We hope to see you again soon on another episode of Legends and Losers.